She rode in alone. No weapons visible, no war paint. Just a girl on a paint horse, riding straight down the center of the main road of the Callaway Ranch at 7 in the morning. She was 17 years old. She stopped her horse in front of the main house, sat there, waiting. Thomas Callaway came out onto the porch with his coffee, looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then she said it, quietly, without anger, without threat, just as a fact that needed to be stated. This used to be my land. Thomas Callaway was 63 years old. He had built this ranch with his own hands over 40 years. He had buried his wife here. He had raised 2 sons here. He had fought drought and flood and cattle thieves and a dozen hard winters to keep this land. And he stood on his porch with his coffee, and he listened. And then he did something that nobody in Rimrock, Texas expected. Not his sons, not his neighbors, not the Apache girl herself, and certainly not the old man sitting on the fence post at the edge of the property, watching, the way Cal Briggs always watched. This channel tells the stories of the Texas frontier where honor had no single face, and justice sometimes arrived on a paint horse at 7 in the morning. Subscribe now. You need to hear what Thomas Callaway did next. West Texas, 1887. The Apache Wars were officially over. Geronimo had surrendered the year before. The last free bands had been taken to reservations in Florida and Alabama, far from the land they had known, far from the rivers and the mountains and the desert they had named in their own language, long before anyone else arrived to rename it. Officially over, but the land remained. The land that had been Apache land for centuries before the first Spanish mission was built, before the first Anglo rancher drove the first herd across the Rio Grande, before the treaties that were signed and broken, before the wars that were fought and declared finished by the people who won them. The land remained, and on the land, the ranches. The Callaway Ranch was one of the oldest in Crockett County. Thomas Callaway had come from Tennessee in 1847. He had filed a land claim under the Republic of Texas before Texas was even a state. He had the papers, he had the deed, he had 40 years of work, written into every fence post and water trough and stone wall on the property. He was not a cruel man, he was not a dishonest man. He had simply come to a place and claimed it, the way men did, in that time, in that place, without asking who had been there before, because in 1847, nobody was asking that question. Cal Briggs had ridden through Rimrock the day before. He had not planned to stop. He had been 3 days out of Del Rio and heading north with no particular destination. But something about the town felt familiar, the specific quiet of a place where something was about to happen. Cal had learned in 30 years to trust that feeling. He had taken a room at the hotel, ordered supper, and waited to find out what the quiet meant. Her name was Na-Ki. In English, the people at the reservation agency had written it as Nancy. She had not corrected them. Some battles were not worth fighting. She had grown up at the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. She had been 4 years old when her band was moved there, old enough to remember the land before, young enough that the memory had the quality of a dream, the smell of a specific river, the shadow of a specific mountain at a specific time of day, the feeling of ground under her feet that felt like hers. Her grandmother had talked about Texas, about the land east of the Guadalupe Mountains where their band had wintered for generations, about the springs that never ran dry, about the canyon where the walls were painted with the images of their ancestors. Her grandmother had died at San Carlos 3 years ago. Before she died, she had described the Texas land so many times, so precisely, with such specific detail, that Na-Ki felt she had been there herself. She had never been there. When the reservation agent had told her she could travel freely within the territory, she had asked only one question. How far was Texas? 4 days' ride, he had said. She had left the next morning. She found the canyon her grandmother had described on the 3rd day. The painted walls were still there, faded by years of wind and rain, but there, the images of her ancestors, still there, on the wall of a canyon that was now according to the deed filed in the county office in Rimrock, part of the Callaway Ranch. She had sat in that canyon for a long time, looking at the paintings, thinking about her grandmother, about the word home, and what it meant to people who had been taken from theirs. And then she had ridden to the main house, and stated the fact that needed to be stated. This used to be my land. Thomas Callaway set his coffee cup down on the porch railing. He looked at the girl on the paint horse. She was young, younger than his granddaughter, sitting straight on that horse the way people sit when they have decided to be dignified regardless of what happens next. He had seen that posture before, on men who were outnumbered but refused to show it, on women who had lost everything but refused to beg, on children who had grown up faster than children should. He recognized it. It meant something. "How long have you been riding?" he asked. 4 days, she said. "From where?" "San Carlos, Arizona." Thomas knew what San Carlos was. He had read about the conditions there in the newspaper. He had formed an opinion about it that he had never said out loud to anyone. "You came 4 days alone to stand in front of my house and tell me this used to be your land," he said. "Yes," she said. "Why?" he asked. She looked at him. The specific look of someone deciding how honest to be. "My grandmother described this land to me until the day she died," she said. "She wanted me to see it. So I came to see it." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Have you seen it?" he asked. "I found the canyon," she said. "The painted walls." Thomas knew the canyon. It was on the south end of his property. He had always left it alone, not out of any particular principle, just because there was nothing useful to do with a canyon with painted walls. "Those paintings belong to my people," she said. "Not as a demand, as information." "Yes," Thomas said, "I expect they do." He picked up his coffee cup, looked at it, set it down again. "You want some breakfast?" he said. The girl blinked. It was the first time her composure had shifted, just slightly. "What?" she said. "Breakfast," Thomas said. "You've been riding 4 days. You must be hungry." Cal Briggs had seen the girl ride in from his position at the edge of the property. He had been sitting on a fence post since before dawn, a habit from 30 years of being a sheriff. You learn more about a place in the early morning than at any other time. He had watched her come down the main road, watched her stop, watched the exchange on the porch. He was too far to hear the words, but he had been reading situations from a distance for 3 decades. He could read this one. The girl's posture, the old rancher's posture, the specific quality of the silence between them. This was not a confrontation. This was a conversation between two people who were both, in their own way, trying to do the right thing. Cal stayed on the fence post. He did not intervene. He did not approach. He watched. Because sometimes the best thing a man with 30 years of experience can do is nothing. Sometimes the situation does not need him. Sometimes the right thing happens on its own. If it stopped happening on its own, Cal would walk over. But for now. And Thomas Callaway invited the Apache girl in for breakfast, and she accepted. And Cal reached into his coat pocket, not for a gun, for the small leather journal he carried, and he wrote one line in it. "Watch this man. He might be the most decent person in this county." The kitchen of the Callaway Ranch was large and plain and smelled of coffee and wood smoke. Thomas's housekeeper, a Mexican woman named Consuela who had worked for the family for 20 years, did not ask questions. She set a plate in front of the girl and poured coffee and went back to her work. Thomas sat across the table. His 2 sons were out on the range already. It was just the 2 of them. The old rancher and the Apache girl, eating breakfast. "What is your name?" Thomas asked. "Naki," she said. "My grandmother's name was Lozen," she added. Thomas looked up. "Lozen," he said. "The warrior woman, Victorio's sister." She looked at him with new attention. "You know of her," she said. "I know of her," Thomas said. "I was in this territory when Victorio was fighting. I read everything I could find about the Apache bands. trying to understand. Did you? She asked. No, he said honestly, not really. She nodded, as if that was the correct answer. My grandmother was not Lozan herself, she said, but she was given that name because she was also brave. She must have been, Thomas said, to raise a granddaughter who rides 4 days alone into Texas to honor her. Naki looked at her plate. Something in her face shifted. Not weakness, just the acknowledgement of something real. She described this land every day, she said. The springs, the canyon, the way the mountains look at sunrise. She wanted me to see it with my own eyes, so that someone living would know it, would carry it. Thomas was quiet. He drank his coffee. He thought about his own grandfather, who had described Tennessee to him the same way. Before Thomas left for Texas and never went back, he thought about what it meant to carry a place inside you, to keep it alive in description because you could not go there. The canyon, he said. The paintings. Yes, she said. I'd like to show you something, he said. After breakfast. He saddled 2 horses, his own bay and a spare roan. He did not explain where they were going to Consuela. He just told her they would be back before supper. They rode south, across the main pasture, through the gate at the south fence, into the rougher country beyond. The canyon entrance was hidden behind a stand of mesquite. You would not find it if you did not know where to look. Thomas knew where to look, because he had found it 40 years ago, on one of his first surveys of the property, and had decided to leave it alone. They rode into the canyon. The walls rose on both sides, limestone, pale gold in the morning light, and on the east wall, the paintings. Naki stopped her horse. She sat very still, looking at the wall. Cal Briggs had followed them, at a distance, out of curiosity now as much as caution. He stopped at the canyon entrance and watched from there. The girl on the roan, the old man on the bay, the painted wall. Nobody speaking. After a long time, Naki dismounted. She walked to the wall, put her hand flat against the limestone, below one of the figures, not touching the painting itself, just the stone beneath it. Thomas watched from his horse. He did not speak. He understood without being told that this was not a moment for words. After a while she turned. Her face was composed, but her eyes were something else. She told me about this figure, she said, pointing to one of the painted images, a figure with arms raised. She said it was placed there by her grandmother's grandmother. 6 generations, Thomas said quietly. 6 generations, she said. Thomas looked at the painting. 6 generations. His family had been in America for 4. He tried to imagine what 4 generations of connection to a place felt like. Then he tried to imagine 6. He could not. I owe you something, he said. She looked at him. I can't give you the land back, he said. That's not something one man can do. I know, she said, but I can do something, he said. They rode back to the main house. Thomas went inside. He was in there for 20 minutes. Naki waited on her horse. Cal Briggs waited at the fence. When Thomas came back out, he was carrying 2 things, a piece of paper and a small iron box. He handed her the paper first. She read it. Her face did not change while she read, but her hands tightened slightly on the paper. It was a document, written in Thomas Calloway's handwriting, witnessed by his signature and seal. It stated that the canyon on the south end of the Calloway Ranch, including the painted walls and the land within 50 yards of those walls in every direction, was to be considered the permanent and exclusive cultural property of the Apache people. That no Calloway, nor any heir of any Calloway would ever alter, damage, or restrict access to the canyon or its paintings. That any Apache person who wished to visit the canyon was to be given free and unimpeded access for as long as a Calloway held the surrounding land. And if the Calloway land was ever sold, this agreement was to be binding on whoever purchased it. She read it twice. Then she looked at him. This is not legal, she said. No, Thomas agreed, not in any court in Texas. Then what is it? She said. It's my word, he said, written down. He held out the iron box. She took it, opened it. Inside was a copy of the document and a key. The box locks, he said. One key. The document is yours. If anyone ever tries to take the canyon from your people, you have my word in writing. Your word means nothing to the courts, she said. No, Thomas said, but it means something to me. He looked at her steadily. And I suspect it means something to you too, or you wouldn't have ridden 4 days to say what needed to be said to a stranger. She looked at the document, at the box, at the old rancher on his porch. Why, she said. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Because your grandmother described this land every day until she died, he said, so that someone living would know it. He looked at the southern horizon, toward the canyon. Now someone does, he said, and that someone has a piece of paper that says so. Cal Briggs rode up to the house. Thomas and Naki both looked at him. Who are you? Thomas asked. Cal Briggs, Cal said, former sheriff of Crockett County. Thomas looked at him. You've been watching since this morning, Thomas said. Yes, Cal said. Why? Habit, Cal said, and because I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Thomas nodded slowly. And now, he said. Cal looked at the document in the girl's hands, at the iron box, at the old rancher on his porch. Now I want to add something, Cal said. He reached into his coat pocket, not for a gun, for his leather journal. He tore a page from the back of it, wrote something, handed it to Thomas. Thomas read it, looked at Cal. I've been a sheriff in this county for 28 years, Cal said. I know every judge, every clerk, every land office official within 200 miles. He looked at Naki. What he gave you is his word, Cal said. I can make it something more. He turned to Thomas, with your permission. Thomas nodded. Cal turned to Naki. I'm going to ride to the county seat, he said. I'm going to file this document as an official deed restriction on this property. It won't give you ownership, but it will make it legally binding that the canyon cannot be altered or access denied. You can do that? She said. I know people, Cal said, and I have a federal deputy appointment that gives me standing to file unusual documents. He looked at her steadily. Your grandmother's description of this land kept it alive for 6 generations, he said. The least I can do is make sure the painting survives 6 more. Cal rode to the county seat that afternoon. He was gone 3 days. When he returned, he carried a stamped and filed copy of the deed restriction, signed by the county clerk, witnessed by 2 officials, legally binding on the Calloway property and any subsequent owner. Thomas Calloway signed the final copy at his kitchen table. Cal witnessed it. Consuelo witnessed it. They sent a copy to the reservation agency at San Carlos, addressed to Naki. Naki had already been gone 2 days by the time Cal returned. She had spent 1 more day at the canyon, sitting with the paintings, with her grandmother's 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 work on the stone wall. And then she had ridden back toward Arizona, 4 days back, the same way she had come, but not the same. She carried the iron box in her saddlebag. She carried the document. She carried the canyon, not just in memory now, in writing, in law, in the word of an old Texas rancher who could not give back the land, but could give back something. In Rimrock, the news spread slowly, the way news spread in small towns. First, Thomas's sons heard what their father had done. They did not understand it. Thomas explained it once, then declined to explain it again. His older son said, "That land is worth money, Pa." Thomas said, "I know." His son said, "You gave away rights to part of it for nothing." Thomas said, "I gave my word. That's not nothing." His son had no answer for that. Cal was in the hotel the morning the sons came to argue with their father. He heard the argument through the wall. He heard Thomas's answer. He wrote it down in his journal. "I gave my word. That's not nothing." He underlined it 3 times. Thomas Calloway did not give back the land. He could not. The law did not allow it. The economics did not allow it. 40 years of his family's life was written into every acre. He could not undo what history had done. No single man could. But he could do something. He could acknowledge what was true. He could put his name on the acknowledgement. He could use what power he had to make the acknowledgement mean something real. That is not justice, not the full justice that history owed, but it is something, and something done honestly, with full understanding of its limitations, is not nothing. Cal Briggs rode out of Rimrock 3 days after filing the document. He did not say goodbye to Thomas Calloway. He did not need to. They had understood each other without many words, the way men understand each other when they share the same basic conviction about what is right, even when they came from different places, even when they had different histories, even when the world they were trying to be decent in was not a decent world. You do what you can, with what you have, where you are. You give your word, and your word is not nothing. A girl rode 4 days alone to say what needed to be said. An old man listened, and did what he could, and the paintings on the canyon wall are still there, in the story at least, where they have always been, waiting for someone to come and see them and carry them forward. Every week on this channel, Cal Briggs rides into another town where something needs to be done. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by the history of the Texas frontier and the Apache people who called it home long before anyone else arrived. If it stayed with you, subscribe. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been given something that wasn't justice, but was still something? The next town is already waiting.